Hi, I'm Gavin, and today I'm going to be reading The Veldt by Ray Bradbury. Let's begin. George, I wish you'd look at the nursery. What's wrong with it? I don't know. Well then, just want you to look at it, is all. Or call a psychiatrist in to look at it. What would a psychiatrist want with the nursery? You know very well what he'd want. His wife paused in the middle of the kitchen and watched the stove busy humming to itself, making supper for four. It's all just that nursery is now than it was. All right, let's have a look. They walked down the hall of their soundproof Happy Life home, which had cost them $30,000 installed. This house, which clothed and fed and rocked them to sleep and played them and played and sang, was good to them. Their approach sensitized a switch somewhere, and the nursery light flicked on when they came within 10 feet of them. Similarly, behind them, in the halls, lights went on and off as they were left behind. The soft automaticity. Well, said George Hadley. They stood on the thatched floor of the nursery. It was 40 feet across by 40 feet long and 30 feet high. It had cost half again as much as the rest of the house. But nothing's too good for our children, George had said. The nursery was silent. It was as empty as a jungle glade at hot high noon. The walls were blank and two-dimensional. Now, George and Lydia Hadley stood in the center of the room. The walls began to purr and recede into a sustained, crystalline distance. It seemed, and presently an African veldt appeared, in three dimensions on all sides, in color produced to the final pebble and bit of straw. The ceiling above them became a deep sky with a hot yellow sun. George Hadley felt the perspiration start on his brow. Let's get out of the sun, he said. This is a little too real, but I don't see anything wrong. Wait a moment. You'll see, said his wife. Now, the hidden ordrophonics were beginning to blow a wind of odor at the two people in the middle of baked velvet. The hot straw smell of lying grass, the cool green smell of the hidden water hole, the great rusty smell of animals, the smell of dust like a red paprika in the hot air. And now the sounds. The thump of distant antelope fed on grassy sod. The paper rustling of vultures. A shadow passed through the sky. The shadow flickered on George Headley's upturned, sweating face. Filthy creature, he heard his wife say. The vultures. You see, they are the lions still. Far over. That way. Now they're on their way to the water hole. They've just been eating, said Lydia. I don't know what. Some animal. George Hadley put his hand up to shield off from the burning light from his squinting eyes. A zebra or a giraffe, maybe. Are you sure? His wife sounded in a peculiarly tense. No, it's a little too late to be sure, he said, amused. Nothing over there I could see but clean bone, and the vultures dropping for what's left. Did you bear that scream? She asked. No. About a minute ago? Sorry. No. The lions were coming, and again George Hadley was filled with admiration for a mechanical genius who had conceived this room, a miracle of efficacy selling for an absurdly low price. Every home should have one. Oh, occasionally they fretted you with their clinical accuracy. They startled you. They gave you a twinge. But most of the time, what fun for everyone. Not only your own son and daughter, but for yourself. Like when you felt like a quick jaunt to a foreign land, a quick change of scenery. Well, here it was. And here the lions were now, 15 feet away, so real, so feverishly, and so startlingly real that you could feel the prickling fur on your hand. Your mouth was stuffed with the dusty upholstery smell of their heated pelts, and the yellow of them was in your eyes, like the yellow of an antique French tapestry, the yellows of lions and summer grass. The sound of the matted lion lungs exhaling on the silent noontide, and the smell of meat from the panting, dripping mouths. The lion stood at George and Lydia Headley with terrible green-yellow eyes. "Watch out!" screamed Lydia. The lions came running at them. Lydia bolted and ran. Instinctively, George sprang after her. Outside, in the hall, with the door slammed, he was laughing and she was crying. They both stood appalled at the other's reaction. "George! Lydia! Oh, my dear, poor, sweet Lydia! They almost got us. Walls, Lydia, remember. Crystal walls. That's all they are. Oh, they look real. I must admit. Africa in your parlor. It's all dimensional. Super reactionary. Super sensitive color film. Mental tape behind the grass screens. It's all orthophonics and sonics, Lydia. Here's my handkerchief. I'm afraid. She came to him and put her body against him and cried steadily. Did you see? Did you feel? It's too real. Now, Lydia, you've got to tell Wendy and Peter not to read any more on Africa. Of course, of course. He patted her. Promise? Sure. And lock the nursery for a few days until I get my nerves settled. You know Peter is difficult about that. When I punished him a month ago by locking the nursery even for a few hours, the tantrum he threw. And Wendy too. They live for the nursery. It's got to be locked. That's all there is to it. All right. Reluctantly, he locked the huge door. You've been working too hard. You need a rest. I don't know. I don't know, she said, blowing her nose, sitting down in a chair that immediately began to rock and comfort her. Maybe I don't have enough to do. Maybe I think maybe I have time to think too much. Why don't we shut the whole house off for a few days and take a vacation? You mean you want to fry my eggs for me? Yes, she nodded. And damn my socks? Yes. A frantic, watery-eyed nodding. And sweep the house? Yes, yes. Oh, yes. But I thought that's why we bought the house, so we wouldn't have to do anything. That's just it. I feel like I don't belong here. The house is a wife and mother now, and nursemaid. I can complete. Can I compete with an African Veldt? Can I bath and scrub the children as efficiently or quickly as the automatic scrub bath can? I cannot. And it isn't just me. It's you. You've been awfully nervous lately. I suppose I have been smoking too much. You look as if you don't know what to do with yourself in this house either. You smoke a little more every morning and drink a little more every afternoon and need a little more sedative every night. You're beginning to feel unnecessary too. Am I? He paused and tried to feel into himself to see what was really there. Oh, George. She looked beyond him, at the nursery door. Those lions can't get out of there, can they? He looked at the door and saw it tremble as if something had jumped against it from the other side. Of course not, he said. At dinner, they ate alone. For Wendy and Peter, they were at a special plastic carnival cross town, and Bad televised home to say they'd be late. To go ahead eating. So George Hadley, amused, sat watching the dining room table produce warm dishes of food in its mechanical interior. We forgot the ketchup, he said. Sorry, said the small voice within the table, and ketchup appeared. As for the nursery, thought George Headley, won't hurt for the children to be locked out of it for a while. Too much of anything isn't good for anyone. Now it was clearly indicated to the children had been spending a little too much time on Africa. That sun, he could feel it on his neck, still like a hot paw. And the lions, the smell of blood. Remarkable how the nursery caught the telepathic emanations of the children's minds and created life to fill their every desire. The children thought lions, and there were lions. The children thought zebras, and there were zebras. Sun, sun. Giraffes, giraffes. Death, death. The last, he chewed tastelessly on the meat. The table bad cut for him. Death thoughts. They were awfully young. Wendy and Peter for death thoughts. Or no, you were never too young, really. Long before you knew what death was, you were wishing it on someone else. When you were 2 years old, you were shooting people with cap pistols. But this, the long, hot African veldt, the awful death in the jaws of a lion, and repeated again and again. Where are you going? He didn't answer Lydia, preoccupied. He let the lights glow softly on ahead of him, extinguished behind him. As he patted the nursery door, he listened against it. Far away, a lion roared. He unlocked the door and opened it. Just before he stepped inside, he heard a faraway scream, and then another roar from the lions, which subsided quickly. He stepped into Africa. How many times in the last year he had opened this door and found Wonderland, Alice, or the Mock Turtle, or Aladdin, his very magical lamp, or Jack Pumpkinhead of Oz, Doctor Dolittle, or the cow jumping over the very real appearing moon. All the all the delightful contraptions of a make-believe world. How often he had seen Pegasus flying in the sky ceiling, or seen fountains of red fireworks, or heard angel voices singing. But now, is yellow hot Africa? This bake oven with murder in the heat. Perhaps Lydia was right. Perhaps they needed a little vacation from the fantasy which was growing a bit too real for the 10-year-old children. It was a right it was all right to exercise one's mind with gymnastic fantasies. When the lively minded children settled on in one pattern, it seemed that at a distance, for the past month, he had heard lions roaring, smelled the strong odors seeping as far away as his study door. But, being busy, he had paid no attention. George Hadley stood on the African grassland alone. The lions looked up from their feeding, watching him. The only flaw to the illusion was the open door through which he could see his wife, far down the dark hall, like a framed picture, eating her dinner abstractedly. Go away, he said to the lions. They did not go. He knew the principle of the room exactly. You sent out your thoughts. Whatever you thought would appear. Let's have Aladdin and his lamp, she snapped. The Veldt land remained. The lions remained. Come on, room. I demand Aladdin, he said. Nothing happens. The lions mumbled in their baked pelts. Aladdin! He went back to dinner. The fool room's out of order, he said. Won't respond. Or what? It can't respond, said Lydia, because the children have thought about Africa and lions and killing so many days that the room's a rut. Could be. Or Pete set it to remain that way. Set it. He may have got into the machinery and fixed something. Peter doesn't know machinery. He's wise for 110. The IQ of his. Nevertheless. Hello, Mom? Hello, Dad. Thaddeus turned. Wendy and Peter were coming from the front door, cheeks like peppermint candy, eyes like bright blue agate marbles, the smell of ozone on their jumpers from their trip in the helicopter. You're just in time for supper, said both parents. We're full of strawberry ice cream and hot dogs, said the children, holding hands. Well, we'll sit and watch. Yes, come tell us about the nursery, said George Hadley. The brother and sister blinked at each other. The nursery? All about Africa and everything, said the father with a false joviality. I don't understand, said Peter. Your mother and I were just traveling through Africa with rod and reel. Tom Swift and his electric lion, said George Headley. There's no Africa in the nursery, said Peter simply. Oh, come on now, Peter, we know better. I don't remember any Africa, Peter said to Wendy. Do you? No. Ramsey, come tell. She obeyed. Wendy, come back here, said George Headley. She was gone. The house lights followed her like a flock of fireflies. Too late. He forgotten to lock the nursery door after his last inspection. Wendy! Wendy'll look and come tell us, said Peter. She doesn't have to tell me. I've seen it. I'm sure you've mistaken, Father. I'm not, Peter. Come along now. But Wendy was back. It's not Africa, she said breathlessly. We'll see about this, said George Hadley. They all walked down the hall together and opened the nursery door. There was a green, lovely forest, and a lovely river, and a purple mountain, high voices singing, and Rima, lovely and mysterious, lurking in the trees with colorful flights of butterflies, like animated bouquets, lingering in her long hair. The African Veldt was gone. The lions were gone. Only Rima was here now, singing a song so beautiful that it brought tears to her eyes. George Hadley looked in at the change scene. Go to bed, he said to the children. They opened their mouths. You heard me, he said. They went off to their air closet, whereas the wind sucked them up like brown leaves. They flew to their slumber rooms. The George Hadley walked through the singing glade and picked up something that lay in the corner near where the lions had been. He walked slowly back to his wife. What is that? She asked. An old wall of mine, he says. He showed it to her. The smell of hot grass was on it, and the smell of a lion. There were drops of saliva on it. It had been bad chewed, and there were blood smears on both sides. He closed the nursery door and locked it tight. In the middle of the night, as he was still awake, knew he knew his wife was awake. Do you think Wendy changed it? She said at last, in the dark room. Of course. Made it a belt, made it from a veldt into a forest and put Rima there instead of lions? Yes. Why? I don't know, but it's staying locked until I find out. How did your wallet get there? I don't know anything, he said, except I'm beginning to be sorry we brought that room for the children. The children are neurotic at all. A room like that is supposed to help them work off their neuroses in a healthful way. I'm starting to wonder. He stared at the ceiling. We've given the children everything they ever wanted. Is this our reward? Secrecy, disobedience? Who was it said? Children are carpets. They should be stepped on occasionally. We've never lifted a hand. They're insufferable. Let's admit it. They come and go when they like, and they treat us as if we're offspring. They're spoiled and we're spoiled. I've actually been acting funny ever since you forbade them to take the rocket to New York for a few months ago. They're not old enough to do that alone, I explained. Nevertheless, I've noticed they've been deadly cool towards us since. I think I'll have David McLean come tomorrow morning to take a look at Africa. But it's not Africa now. It's Green Mansion's country in Rima. I have a feeling it'll be Africa again before then. A moment later, they heard screams. Two screams. Two people screaming from downstairs, and a roar of lions. Wendy and Peter aren't there in their rooms, said his wife. He lay in bed with his beating heart. No, they've broken into the nursery. Those screams, they sound familiar. Do they? Yes, awfully. And although their beds were very barred, the two adults couldn't be rocked to sleep for another hour. The smell of cats was in the night air. Father, said Peter. Yes. Peter looked at his shoes. He never looked up at his father anymore, nor his mother. You aren't going to lock up the nursery for good, are you? It all depends. On what? Snapped Peter. On you and your sister. If you intersperse this Africa with a little variety, oh, Sweden perhaps, or Denmark, or China. I thought we were free to play as we wish. You are, within reasonable bounds. What's wrong with Africa, father? Oh, so now you admit you have been going up to Africa, do you? I wouldn't want the nursery locked up, said Peter coldly. Ever. Matter of fact, we're thinking of turning the whole house off for a month. Live sort of a carefree one for all existence. That sounds dreadful. Would I have to tie my own shoes and instead of letting the shoe tire do it? Brush my own teeth and comb my own hair and give myself a bath? It'd be fun for a change, don't you think? No, it'd be horrid. I didn't like when you took the picture painter last month. That's because I wanted you to learn to paint by yourself, son. I don't want you to do anything but look, listen, and smell. What else is there to do? All right, go play in Africa. Will you shut off the house sometime soon? Considering it. I don't think you should consider it any more, father. I won't have any threats from my sons. Very well. And Peter strolled off to the nursery. Am I on time? Said David McLean. Breakfast? Asked George Headley. Thanks. Had some. What's the trouble? David, you're a psychologist. I should hope so. Well then, you have a look at our nursery. You saw it a year ago when you dropped by. Did you notice anything peculiar about it back then? Can't say I did. The usual violences, a tendency towards slight paranoia here or there. The usual in children because they feel persecuted by parents constantly. But, oh, really nothing. They walked down the hall. I locked up the nursery, explained the father, and the children broke back into it during the night. I left them stay so they could form the patterns for you to see. There was a terrible screaming from the nursery. There it is, said George Headley. See what you make of it. They walked in on the children without rapping. Their screams had faded. The lions were feeding. Run outside a moment, children, said George Headley. No, don't change the mental combination. Leave the walls as they are. Get. With the children gone, the two men stood studying the lions cluster at a distance, eating at a great relish of whatever it was they had caught. I wish I knew what it was, said George Headley. Sometimes I can almost see. Do you think if I brought high-powered binoculars here and David McLean laughed, laughed dryly. Hardly. He turned to study all four walls. How long has this been going on? A little over a month. Certainly doesn't feel good. I want facts, not feelings. My dear George, a psychologist never saw a fact in his life. He only hears about feelings. Vague things. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good, I tell you. Trust my hunches and my instincts. I have a nose for something bad. This is very bad. My advice to you is that you have the whole damn room torn down and your children brought to me every day for the next year for treatment. Is it that bad? I'm afraid so. One of the original uses of these nurseries is so that we could study the patterns left on walls by the children's minds, to study at our leisure, and help the child. In this case, however, the room has become a channel towards destructive thoughts, instead of a release away from them. Didn't you sense this before? I sense only that you bad spoiled your that you bad spoiled your children more than most, and now you're letting them down in some way. What day? What way? I wouldn't let them go to New York. What else? I've taken a few machines from the house and threaded them a month ago. With closing up the nursery, unless they did homework, I did close it for a few days to show I meant business. Aha! Does that mean anything? Everything. What I saw before, or before they had a Santa Claus, now they have a Scrooge. Uh, Children prefer Santas. You let them into this room, and this house replace you and your wife in the children's affections. This room is more than their mother and father, far more important than their lives, than their real parents. And now you come along wanting to shut it off? No wonder there's hatred here. You can feel it coming out of the sky. Feel that, son, George? George, you'll have to change your life. Like too many others, you built it around creature comforts. Why'd you starve tomorrow if something went wrong in your kitchen? You wouldn't know bow to tap an egg. Nevertheless, turn everything off. Start new. It'll take time, but we make good children out of bad in a year. Wait and see. But won't the shock be too much for the children? Shutting the room up abruptly for good? I don't want them going any deeper into this. That's all. The lions were finished with their red feast. The lions were standing on the edge of a clearing, watching the two men. Now I'm feeling persecuted, said McLean. Let's get out of here. I never have cared for these damned rooms. Makes me nervous. The lions look real, don't they? Said George Headley. I don't suppose there's any way. What? They could become real. Not that I know. Some flaw in the machinery, a tampering or something. No. They went to the door. I don't imagine this room will like being turned off, said the father. Nothing ever likes to die. Even a room. Wonder if it hates me for wanting to switch it off. Paranoia is thick around here today, said David McLean. You can follow it like a spore. Hello? He bent up and picked up a bloody scarf. Is this yours? No. George Hadley's face was rigid. Belongs to Lydia. We went to the fuse box together and threw the switch that killed the nursery. The two children were in hysterics. They screamed and pranced and threw things. They yelled and sobbed and swore and jumped on the furniture. You can't do that to the nursery. You can't. Now, children. The children flung themselves onto the couch, weeping. George, said Lydia Hadley, turn on the nursery. Just for a few moments. You can't be so abrupt. No, you can't be so cruel. Lydia, it's off, and it stays off. The whole damn house dies as of here and now. The more I see of this mess we put ourselves into, the more it sickens me. We've been contenting our mechanical electronic navels for too long. My God, and how we need a breath of honest air. And he marched about the house, turning off the voice clocks, the stoves, the heaters, the shoe shiners, the shoelacers, the body scrubbers, the swabbers, the massagers, every other machine he could put his hand into. The house was full of dead bodies, it seemed. It felt like a mechanical cemetery. So silent. None of none of the hummingbird hidden energy of the machines waiting to function on the tap button. Don't let them do it, wailed Peter at the ceiling, as if he was talking to the house, the nursery. Don't let father kill everything. He turned to his father. Oh, I hate you. Insults won't get you anywhere. I wish you were dead. We were, for a long while. Now we're really going to start living. Instead of being handled and massaged, we're going to live forever. Wendy was crying, and Peter joined her again. Just a moment. Just one moment. Just another moment of nursery, they wailed. Oh, George, said the wife, it can't hurt. All right, if they'll just shut up. 1 minute, mind you, then off forever. Daddy, 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 sang the children, smiling with wet faces. Then we're going on vacation. David McLean is coming back in half an hour to help us move out and get to the airport. I'm going to dress. You can turn on the nursery for a minute. Lydia, just a minute, mind you. And the three of them went babbling off while he let himself be vacuumed upstairs through the air flue and set about dressing himself. A minute later, Lydia appeared. I'll be glad when we get away, she sighed. Didn't you leave them in the nursery? I want to dress too. Oh, that's horrid. Oh, that horrid Africa. What can they see in it? Well, in 5 minutes we'll be on our way to Iowa. Lord, how did we ever get in this house? What prompted us by nightmare? Pride? Honey? Foolishness? I think we better get downstairs before those kids get engrossed with those damn beasts again. Just then they heard the children calling, Daddy, Mommy, come quick! Quick! They went downstairs and the air flew and ran down the hall. The children were nowhere in sight. Wendy? Peter? They ran to the nursery. The Veldt land was empty save for the lions waiting, looking at them. Peter? Wendy? The door slammed. Wendy? Peter? George Hadley and his wife whirled and ran back to the door. Open the door, cried George Hadley, opening the knot. Why, they've locked it from the outside. Peter! He beat at the door. Open up! He let He heard Peter's voice outside against the door. Don't let them switch off the nursery in the house, he was saying. Mr. and Mrs. George Hadley beat at the door. Don't be ridiculous, children. It's time to go. Mr. McLean will be here in a minute, and then they heard the sounds. The lions on three sides of them. The yellow Veldt glass paddling through the dry straw, rumbling in their roaring in their throats. The lions. Mr. Hadley looked at his wife, and they turned and looked back at the beast slowly edging forward, crouching, tails stiff. Mr. and Mrs. Hadley screamed, and suddenly they realized those other screams sounded familiar. Well, here I am, said David McLean in the nursery doorway. Oh, hello. He stared at the two children seated in the center of an open glade, eating a little picnic lunch. Beyond them was the water hole and the yellow Veldt land. Above was the hot sun. He began to perspire. Where are your father and mother? The children looked up and smiled. Oh, he'll be here directly. Good, we must get going. At a distance, Mr. McLean saw lions fighting and clawing and then quieting down to feed in silence under the shady tree. He squinted at the lions with his hand tipped to his eyes. Lions were done feeding, and they moved back to the water hole to drink. A shadow flickered over Mr. McLean's hot face. Many shadows flickered. The vultures were dropping down the blazing sky. A cup of tea? Asked Wendy in silence.